The Smokestack Hobby Shop in Lancaster, Ohio recently became the home of an impressive train collection. This massive collection, with well over 20,000 pieces, once belonged to a private collector who lived in Pratt, Kansas, nearly 1,000 miles away from Lancaster. The unique story of how this collection ended up at the Smokestack first needs to start with the unique individual who devoted his life to his hobby, Darrel Brehm. Darrel Brehm was born in 1939 in Pratt, Kansas. One Christmas morning, Darrel received a gift that would spark his passion.
When he was a young child, like maybe 10, he received a Lionel train for Christmas. And whatever I think triggers any of us to have an enthusiasm for something, that did it for him. And I think, in fact, the Lionel train we still have, and he kept it the whole time as part of the collection.
And as Darrel grew, so did his collection.
I remember as a child, the train collection at the time was in our basement. We had a small farmhouse in the basement in 1 or 2 rooms. Then as they added onto our home, we added a new basement. Dad kind of expanded into the new basement. As he grew in age and his collection grew in age, he would collect different types of things. I remember we'd see him a lot of times in the family room over at the little craft table with his headset on, with his magnifying glasses, working on his kits. I remember he would put shingles on with a pair of tweezers and glue on his buildings. He would hand paint some of his rolling stock cars. So he was very detailed oriented and creative with his collection. Obviously you can see he's very passionate.
The level of artistry that Darrel's trains and his dioramas and everything exhibited, he really was a really magnificent artist. And that was his medium. He wasn't painting big canvases. He was painting little tiny fence posts around a corral.
He'd build a full room diorama. I mean, you would crawl under to get under it, and the whole room would be full of mountainscapes and rivers and bridges. And then he would get it almost completed, and he'd start over. And then he'd move to another room and start another one, and nothing was ever finished. I mean, we never saw a finished one because it was always being redeveloped and recreated.
Sadly, in July 2022, Darrel passed away at the age of 83.
At the time, we were trying to decide what to do with Dad's collection. He passed away. We're trying to think about how do we best respect 70 plus years of collection for him.
Doug and Stacy were driving back to Kansas from Colorado in the summer of 2022, listening to the radio when something caught their attention.
But I had NPR on and I was listening to it, and we were kind of talking, so I wasn't really listening to it, but I did hear something about trains and toy trains and collectors, and it was just enough to perk me up and say, wait, what is this? And we turned it up.
What they heard was an NPR story featuring Smokestack's co-owner.
Consumer prices were out of control. Gas prices were crazy. And so Scott Horsey from NPR was wanting to reach out to some small businesses to see how they were adapting. You know, what were they changing what they were selling, how they were staying in business, and how they were satisfying their customers. And so he reached out to me to do, just to kind of hear what I had to say.
But when Patty was speaking on the NPR program, just how she communicated really perked our interest to say, let's look into this. So I think it was maybe the next day I called.
I happened to answer the phone, and this gentleman says something like, you know, I've listened to a story on NPR. Is this Patty Reardon? Yes, it is. And he starts to talk about the fact that he heard me on the radio, heard me talking about the train collections. His father had recently passed away, and his father had a very large train collection.
She said, this gentleman's gonna call, and we're gonna do a FaceTime, and he's got 20,000 pieces of rolling stock. And Mike and I looked at each other and said, I 20,000? Are you sure? Is it maybe just 2,000? You just added another zero? And she goes, well, maybe, but I thought he said 20. And sure enough, it was 20,000 pieces of rolling stock. So our first impression was this can't possibly be right, but if it is, wow.
We've heard of big collections before, and they're somewhat relative, so I thought, okay, we'll take a look at this one. But we had a Zoom meeting with Doug, and he started walking through the house, showing us room by room, just stacked. I mean, stacked with trains. And it was like, you'll probably hear me say the word wow a lot. It was incredible.
The smokestack team assembled and traveled to Kansas on what would be their first of 3 trips west.
So my brother and I drove out with, we have a trailer, and we loaded up with all those boxes. And he and I left 2 days early and drove out. And then the rest of the crew flew in on a Friday night. We met them at the airport, and the next morning we got up in Wichita. We picked up 2 big 26-foot U-Haul trucks, and we drove over to the home and started packing.
So when you see it in person, every room we went into was just stacked underneath things, on things, against the wall. It was incredible. It was just overwhelming, the amount of things that he had collected in every aspect of model railroading, from scenery to the electrical end of it to track to, he had, I forget the exact number, 5 or 6 layouts throughout his basement.
The house looked a lot smaller, and then to be a multi-million-dollar collection of trains, it was crazy to see that it was stuffed into this little house.
We got the couch out of the way and got it upstairs, but there was building kits stuffed underneath the couch. And
A lot, yeah. Anywhere you could put something, he
Yes.
put something. It was crazy.
With the collection carefully packaged and safely transported to Lancaster, the smokestack team began the task of processing the items.
And we were able to get another unit near us here in the mall that was just empty, and that became what we called our warehouse. So we were able to put everything in the warehouse, and when it was all in there, we just stood there and looked and said, how are we ever going to get through all this stuff? There was so much of it. But we have a great team of guys that come in every week, and they sit there and they catalog and price things and clean it and test it, and every week we get new stuff on the floor. So it's a process, but we're getting through it.
After each individual item is cleaned, checked, and tested, it's put on display at the Smokestack's River Valley Mall location. The reaction from the train collecting community has been overwhelming.
We have people calling from literally all over the United States, people coming in from a variety of states to come in and see this collection. So the response has been really great.
All of a sudden we got inundated with people calling us and wanting to know about the collection. Or they saw some of the trains you can maybe see behind me on the wall and said, I want that third one down, 2 over to the left, and we got so many calls like that. So we are on the map that we weren't, in a way that we weren't before, which is fantastic.
The Brehm family is grateful they heard that story on the radio, grateful to have discovered Don and Patty.
And what we found were 2 great retail professionals and train enthusiasts. We also found 2 individuals that we connected with, that had become friends, that we knew we could entrust our father's lifetime collection to be respected and to be appreciated as they tried to parcel it out to other enthusiasts, others who could enjoy it.
That's what I think has motivated me the most with this. It's just passing on this collection, which, Darrel Brehm clearly loved doing all of this. We are selling it with the family. In the collection world like this, oftentimes you're selling something on consignment. So that's what we're doing with the family, which has actually been amazing because we talk to them at least every week.
One of the things I loved about Don and Patty's thought about this is they wanted to also share with others and make it available to others. And the way that they have cared for it and have custodied the items in a way that I know Dad looking down is going to very much be proud of, we couldn't have picked a better partner.
If you would like to see the Darrel Brehm collection, stop by the Smokestack Hobby Shop in Lancaster, Ohio, or visit the Smokestack online at www.smokestackhobby.com for the latest collection news and to see if they're coming to a train show near you.